Herzlich willkommen bei Potluck Food Talks, der ultimativen Sendung über die Welt hinter den Kulissen der Gastronomie. Heute bin ich hier mit meinem treuen Begleiter Phil, Schnibbelmeister Walte.
Wow, I'm amazed. I'm very, very impressed. I mean, I knew your German was good. I haven't heard you speak German for such a long time.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah,
incredible.
It's been a while.
Incredible. I kind of think that we should make this the default intro now. That's how
really?
good it was. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
How are you doing?
Good, man. Good. It's been a hectic week, like most of them. Work, tours, but nice, fun. So listen, I wanted to talk to you about something we talked when we were at Poppel, the Noma's burger place in Copenhagen. And we were having this conversation about, first of all, we started talking about Reagan Rachel, this viral B-girl in the Olympics from Australia that opened like a huge debate about, first of all, if breakdance should be in the Olympics and about her performance and this kind of thing. So you shared some thoughts about that. What did you exactly say back then?
I mean, I think it was a bit, I don't really remember what I said in that instance. The thing with me is that I sometimes say very impulsive things, right? I get like a very strong opinion and I kind of defend it to the death. And then when somebody asks me about it later, I'm kind of like, oh, I said that. Well, I don't see it that strongly anymore. But like, I think it was the first time that breakdance was in the Olympics, right?
Yeah, and apparently the last time as well. Like they won't do it again.
It seems like it. I mean, that's pretty crazy. And I mean, since that happened, there have been so many details about this whole incident coming up. It's kind of like people sort of like, well, did she scam it? Did she scam her way into it? But then came out that she was a breakdancer and her boyfriend's like a breakdance instructor. And when you see him breakdance, it's like very similar style to her. So it's kind of like, was it on purpose? But I mean, come on, it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's such a shame that there's like, because breakdancing can be such an intense sport that I feel like it's such a shame that it got so misrepresented with now the repercussions that it's not going to be included in the Olympics, which I don't think is that big of a problem because for me, I don't know, like, I'm sorry, maybe it's just not my scene, but I don't think breakdancing should be in the Olympics. Like I'm all for breakdancing competitions, but the Olympics are the Olympics, it's like something steeped in tradition. And I don't know, I don't really see breakdancing there. How do you feel?
No, I agree with you. And in my opinion, I've been following hip hop culture for the last 25 years since I was like a little kid. And especially rap battles, not so much breakdance battles, but I think that they're kind of like in the same family of competitions. And for me, there is always a place for these outcasts, for these outsiders that have like a completely different style and do things that are against the rules and things the way they shouldn't be done. And I understand like in a hip hop context that makes sense, but maybe not in an Olympic context. I mean, this woman is like a respected big girl in the urban dance community because her style and the way she does things. But I understand you can't bring that to an Olympic context. Is that there are different rules and like a different frame. And that's my opinion about it. But then when we were talking about this, then you also mentioned that for you, martial arts shouldn't be in the Olympics. Well, why? What's your opinion on that?
Well, that's like a whole topic, right? I mean, it's not like I don't think that martial arts shouldn't be in the Olympics. I very much enjoy watching martial art contests, but it is also a very old discussion whether putting a martial art into a contest environment is changing and morphing the martial art itself in its practice, because it is something different. For example, if you take judo, right, which is, I mean, one of the, grappling and judo and stuff like that is like one of the oldest grappling for sure. Roman Greco grappling.
Yeah.
Is, one of the original categories in the Olympics, right? And like, Jigoro Kano, the founder of judo, wrote like a sort of manifest when he made judo what it is, because judo, just kind of like jujitsu, it got derived from a more sort of like larger martial art that was, the Japanese general martial art. And he made the judo out of it by stripping away the unnecessary and just focusing on the throwing and the newaza and stuff like that. And he said that it should, in this manifesto, he said that it should never be used in a contest environment, because then you start, instead of starting to think about self-defense and efficiency in the martial art, you start thinking about how to score points, how to hold points, how to stay ahead with points rather than your opponent. And the idea of a martial art then gets lost, right? And that is the whole idea. That's why it's like a controversial topic, whether you should practice a martial art in a competitive environment or not. On the other side, right, if you look at modern jiu-jitsu, if you look at jiu-jitsu practitioners, people who compete in jiu-jitsu, they're usually a lot better than people who don't compete, just in general, because it's a completely different environment being in a competition state and going against people than to be in practice. In jiu-jitsu practice, you can spar against people full on, right? It's not like you're just kind of making movements and stuff. You go full steam ahead. But it's still different being in a dojo than being in a competition hall with fucking 20 different people ready to kill you, right? And it makes you push yourself in a completely different way. It's very, very intense. Anybody who's experienced it, it's a really, I feel like it's a really reality altering experience, because you as a modern person are never in that environment, really.
Of course. Yeah. And the reason I'm asking this question, so we're not starting here like a sports podcast.
I'm digging it though.
So how would you extrapolate this into the culinary profession? Do you think like getting into competitions or getting obsessed about getting some prizes or some recognitions or these kind of things, do you think this somehow corrupts your culinary bushido or something like that?
Oh, that's a very intense question, I think. Because like the first thing when you ask this question that comes to mind is obviously, what is the most well-known prize out there is Michelin stars, right? So both you and me, we've seen kitchens that just cook what they want to cook. And I'm pretty sure we've both also seen kitchens that cook to get Michelin stars, right? And it is obviously, if you're really strict, it is not an honest expression of what you want to do. If you were just cooking, right, without keeping in mind any sort of rewards or anything, you would have a completely different expression. But so many of the things that we do, maybe even subconsciously, are dictated by a very certain pattern that we think we need to fall into in order to please a certain someone, right? And you don't like for example, I used to work with this chef relatively briefly, but I took a lot out of it, called Junya Yamasaki. And he was a Japanese chef he is a Japanese chef. He was in London back then. He opened Koya, which was first an udon noodle bar, and then later became much, much more well-known for his daily specials, his blackboard specials, because he would cook very creative dishes with British ingredients using Japanese technique and a Japanese mindset. And it was fucking crazy. Like, it was so good. And he just did what he found aesthetic and nice. And he very much didn't want any fancy shit, any blah. He didn't want to please anybody. He just wanted to make really authentically good food. And it was some of the most creative and cool food that I've seen at that time.
I think that's the highest position a chef can aspire, but at the same time, it's the most difficult one, because to get there, you need to be in a context where you don't have owners pushing you to work under some kind of frame, or it could be owners, it could be like the style of the restaurant you're working. So in that case, it has to be you, and your restaurant is your dojo, and you're able to do whatever your search is, your path, your expression of
absolutely
cooking, right?
Absolutely. And it's like, the more I think about it, I'm definitely not doing that, I'm definitely not at a point where I can, not that I think about it consciously, but now kind of looking at what I'm doing right now, I can definitely not go of certain stigmas and parameters concerning food. I think maybe that is a topic for deeper meditation, really, because kind of letting go of how you feel things need to be, and really, really stepping out of the picture and kind of thinking about, well, what is the most, like, what is important? What is the sensation? I know a couple of chefs who cook like that. For example, my friend Norbert, he often cooks like that, where you can see it's completely not directed to be in any sort of frame, of fine dining or not fine dining or French cooking or this cooking or whatever. Like, fuck that. It's just ingredient and craft and personal expression.
Yeah, and I also think that another factor in that puzzle is your team, because sometimes you want to do whatever the fuck you want, but you have like a sous chef or some other chefs. They also have like their own views and opinions, and you're like working in a music band, and it's in that context is also not okay to be the eccentric artist that wants everybody to follow, right? So that also plays a role. So that there are also these very mystical restaurants where there's only one chef working and doing everything and doing whatever he wants. But that's also very, very difficult to find and to do at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And like what you said earlier, it's like really difficult depending on the environment that you're in. If you have a small, like if you're starting out doing this, right? And you just want to do what you want to do, you need a small restaurant where you can cook by yourself or like with one or two more people. And then you can really just kind of like, but then it's a big risk also, right? It's like, if do you want to take that risk? It's crazy. And then when people come and say, hey, what kind of food do you do? What do you say? Do you say, hey, I just do whatever I feel, like that's bullshit. People can't work, like people don't function like that. People need a label.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something very important. And that's something I learned when I was studying design. This is what a brand teacher will tell you. He will tell you that you can never do that. You can never like say what you just said. I do whatever I want, how I feel. So people need to have like a label, as you say, of what you're doing. It comes to mind, for example, Lola, which is a restaurant in Copenhagen from Camilla Seidler. And I haven't followed the restaurant so much, but when they open and when I ask what it is about, that's exactly what they would say. It's like, it's a result of the travels we've had across the world. And that if you say that for someone, it's very difficult to picture what that is.
Yeah.
But that's all a matter of marketing and communication and brand communication. I don't think if we see food as art, which I think it is, at least in this context and other contexts it's not, then you should be able to do whatever you want. There are no rules, right? But at the same time, you need to find somehow a way to communicate efficiently what you're doing. And that's very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I think what you just said is really important, because often we like chefs, we forget about that part. We think of this like, creative expression and blah and this and that. But it's like as much part of your job as this creative expression and the ideas and the culinary, like the idea development and stuff like that. You're in the end cooking for a customer, and your job is that to provide it in a way. It's just as important for you to be able to express yourself creatively as it is for you to put it in a context where it works for the customer and where people understand your concept and people like it and people want to come in all the time, so that you have enough customers to fill the restaurant, to pay your staff, to pay for the ingredients, so that you can keep doing the thing that you're expressing yourself with creatively. And a lot of times I feel like people take this creative expression as an excuse for things not working out, right? It's kind of like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It's kind of like, yeah, well, if you're not doing it in a way, it's great if you have these like crazy ideas and it's like fulfilling you. But the idea of a restaurant is not an ego man show, it's a organism that lives off each other, right? Like if you imagine these like little suckerfish that clean off the skin of a shark, right? If these little suckerfish would instead of just eating like the impurities on the skin, eat the fucking shark. There'd be no shark left, right? So it's like, and vice versa, if the shark would eat the fish, you'd have nothing to clean its skin, right? So it's like an organism. It needs to be in balance. You can't just go crazy with your creative expression and do whatever the fuck you want. You can, as long as you keep pushing the boundaries of what you can sell, how you can sell it, how you can market it, riding that wave, like, for example, like you take, I don't know, like, El Bulli, right? When they started pushing it, they were able to draw enough attention to keep doing this and to get more customers in to keep, because like if they would have just gone fucking full metal jacket and committed to all the shit that they wanted to do straight away, like without caring about how it was perceived, right? And it's okay to shock to a certain point, but if you have no customers coming in, then you have no canvas to paint on anymore.
Which is a very interesting example because have you seen the posts lately from El Bulli Foundation? They've been posting like chronologically the dishes they developed from the early 90s until now. My favorite epoch was when it was still Nouvelle Cuisine Catalan. Somehow it was 92, 93. And then you can see a very clear line starting in 94, which is where the first Bulli catalog starts. And from then on, it's really very hard to define what it is, because they became very technical, but at the same time, they really were doing whatever the fuck they wanted, like they could mix recipes and elaborations from all over the world, combinations of flavor that were never combined before. But, I would say there's also like a parallel between what El Bulli was doing and what was happening in other disciplines at the moment worldwide, like architecture or graphic design, where everything got digitalized. And for that reason, there was like an overcharge of everything. Everything was more and more overloaded of elements and these kind of things. And I think that's reflected on that cuisine. But I mean, if you ask anyone about what El Bulli is, it's very hard to define what it is. And for that reason, some smart journalists came up with the idea molecular gastronomy. That's what it is. And that stuck. And it stuck really well because a lot of people,
yes,
that's what they define about it, especially in Germany. People talk about, Molekularküche, and there's a specific idea behind that. But I think El Bulli is much more than that. But at the end, you need to have like that anchor for the audience to understand what it is about, or at least to have a reference to understand what you're approaching, what it is, Again, Mugaritz started using the label. They define themselves as techno-emotional. So it's technical and emotional. Emotional doesn't necessarily mean positive. They can also give you negative emotions as part of the experience.
Mostly.
Which is controversial in itself. But I would say pretty much the technical side is what makes them so interesting, especially for chefs.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of like, it's interesting, like thinking about that is kind of like, oh yeah, somebody coined the term molecular gastronomy, and suddenly you had something that people could fantasize about what that means, right? And like, if you think about it, people really are like sheep in a way, you need to give them something that they can like follow, in like a direction. And I think the most elegant way, and probably also the most, like the nicest way, is if you can give the broad majority of people, like, how do I want to say this? You can give them a general direction that's very shallow, right? Where they can kind of delve into what you're doing and be happy with it and enjoy it and feel like, I understand what this is. But then there is some people who go a little bit more in depth because they're interested in food, or because the food kind of resonates with them. And they kind of, because sometimes you have guests, they come and they just kind of understand what you're trying to do, right? And those are the best guests, right? Those are the guys that we want to have. Not that we don't want to have the other ones, but they're really kind of who understand what we want to do more and more. And if you have this like general sort of like direction that people can go in and be happy with and come to your restaurant and eat and enjoy it and leave, but you give the like possibility for those people who kind of really understand and resonate with what you're doing to go more in depth, the sort of like chosen few, you know, I think that's the ideal scenario, because if you're just sort of like, hey, either you get it or you don't get it, that's also not very hospitable. And hospitality, the sense of like what hospitality is, I feel like often gets lost in these very ego-driven ideas of especially chefs, you know?
But going again to the very beginning where we were talking about the Olympics and martial arts, and what I wanted to debate here around is the nature of competition among chefs or restaurants, be it internally in a restaurant or being between restaurants. Do you think that there's like a healthy point to that, or getting away from that is the healthiest, or even to develop? I do think when I work like in very demanding environments, these restaurants were really, really pushing. I mean, one of the things we talked about when we were at Noma, and one of the most impressive things that you would see everybody was really pushing hard every second. There was no one looking around, not knowing what to do. Everybody had like a specific task that you could see. It required a lot of attention, and they were executing calmly, but without stopping, right? And I think putting yourself in those situations that makes you do things that you thought you weren't able to achieve is what makes you better as a chef. I do think, in my opinion, like answering the question myself, I do think like a healthy point of tension and competition, it's necessary to grow as a chef.
100%. I 100% agree. I think there needs to be, you know, like it depends how you look at competition, right? If we imagine competition being like a very, you know, angry and spiteful environment where chefs are trying to be better than the next in a way that's sort of like, oh, I'm going to show this person, blah, blah, blah. But I don't see that. When I think about competition, especially in a kitchen environment, I think it's crucial for growth. I think there needs to be a environment of positive reinforcement, of inspiring each other in between the team and pushing each other to be a better version of themselves every day. Because, you know, like there has to be a certain amount of friction for there to be change. And I don't mean friction in any negative sort of way. It doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be sort of like, oh, what the fuck is this? You need to be faster, blah, blah, blah. I don't mean that kind of friction. I mean positive friction of sort of like, hey, look, what about this? We can do this like this and blah. Yeah, it's going to take a little bit more work, but look, you can do it like this and blah. And then when people kind of see the outcome of these things, some people will not want that. And that's totally fine. Not everybody wants to be in a state of constant improvement because it takes friction, it takes work, and it takes energy. For me, it's the only way that I can work, because otherwise I get fucking depressed. Otherwise I'd have like an office job or something. It doesn't have to be a huge step that you take every day. And it doesn't have to be a huge expenditure of energy. But there should be a slow and steady progress, right? And the only way that I really like to work, I get really grumpy when it's not like this also. The only way that I really like to work is I have people around me that I can talk to. I can look at things. I can say like, hey, how's the beef at the moment? You know?
The beef, you mean like the competition beef?
No. The actual beef. The actual beef. How's the beef? Who's killing who today? No, but can you know, like this, how are the onions? You know, yes, last week they were really spicy. How are they today? Is it still affecting the sauce, etc.? Hey, what's coming from the garden, this and that. And just a constant environment of sort of like, let's take the subject of cooking and really look at it and keep looking at it and looking at it and making it better and better and better. And it's crazy, even sort of like the chef de parties that I have, right? They're doing a decent job, but there's always something that you can look at and say, hey, look, if we make the meringue a little bit different, instead of doing this, do it like that. And just reduce the sugar a little bit and whip it a little bit less. And then you see, when you take the canal off the meringue, you have much smoother edges, which means when you press the iron onto it, it kind of spreads in a more even way. And it's like these tiny details that make, at the end of the day, a really big difference.
If we're talking about competition, what are your thoughts on losing? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. What about losing?
Eric, there's no losing in my dojo. There's only winning in my dojo, and my kitchen.
We kill losers.
I mean, what do we define as losing?
I mean, I was once in a business and like in a meeting in a restaurant, where there were like the chef de parties and I don't remember what happened, but it was definitely a situation where we lost. And I remember me saying like, it's also important to know how to lose properly. And the owner of the restaurant was that, no, we never lose and this and that. And I really think like embracing defeats when they come and learning how to learn from them and how to improve from them, I think it's crucial.
Absolutely.
And denying it is just denial. It's like Donald Trump denying losing the elections like a little 2-year-old kid. And yeah, I think that's also part of growing. And it also comes to mind the relationship between the bear, Carmi, and this guy, I don't remember the name, the guy that was like a pastry chef in Copenhagen training Marcus, that guy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That he said that he was kind of like the best in the kitchen until he met Carmi and he saw that this other person was much better than him. I know that like this ability to recognize when the guy next to you is better than you and be able to learn from him, I think it's vital for your development. And denying that and just thinking you did better even if you didn't, that's just fooling yourself,
Absolutely. It's you are missing out on an opportunity to learn, basically, if you don't accept losing, because that's the thing, right? It's kind of like, how do you think about losing? Do you think about losing as like a final thing? I've lost, that's it, right? Or is it just a step along the way, a difficult step, a small period of, more friction than before, right? Where it's uncomfortable, friction's uncomfortable, right? Pressure's uncomfortable. But through that, you do go through a process, and losing in whatever way, this is, whether this is, a bad service, I feel like I've lost when I had a bad service. And I also struggle with, dealing with it. Like sometimes I go home and I'm like, fuck everything, fuck all of this. But what do you do with it? That is the most important thing, because anything can happen, right? But it is how you approach that very thing that makes the difference. It's not the circumstance. It's not the thing that dictates what is happening to you and what you take out of it. You are the person dictating that. And you have the choice of either benefiting from that situation or letting yourself get swept away and not taking anything from it. And if you look at it like that, very emotionally detached, you're like, well, of course I'm going to take something away from it. It's like, okay, well, then do that, but then you have to also live it. And like you said, it's kind of like, it sucks, right? Just like if you go back to the martial art thing, it sucks when you get, I don't know, I train jiu-jitsu. So if you get caught in a submission, it sucks getting, the shit squeezed out of your neck and having to tap. It doesn't feel good, but you learn from it, right? And you can either say, fuck this, I'm never going to train again. It's like, well, you're never going to get better and you're always going to get choked out. Or you just continue on and you leave this little moment of pressure behind and you grow out of it.
That's it for this week's episode of Potluck Food Talks. If you like what we're doing, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok as Potluck Food Talks. The show airs every Monday.